But I'm not giving him a pass. I'm not making excuses for Zelensky. But Ukraine has got, 100% debt to GDP ratio, limited industrial capacity. Like it can't fight a war without Western aid, period. And so it's France, UK, United States that are paying for all this. Why would the Western countries want to keep the war going? Obviously they do.
This is a very good question. To be frank, I think that the approach that Donald Trump team offered is a very constructive approach. In any way, Ukraine wouldn't survive without aid. But one thing is to plan the investment, right? To boost businesses, to provide jobs, to pay taxes, to recover economy, and to have returnings, right? And another one just to provide the money for the war. And I believe that the governments gave so much money, and some of those governments, they just cannot back up now. They cannot say that we gave those money for a dictator, because they're afraid about their ratings and their own situation. Right now, some of the Europeans were saying, Ukrainian members of parliament, that Ukraine was undermining them because of corruption. Ukrainians are begging, please, just open your eyes, help us stop this war. It's not about your ratings, it's about people paying with blood.
Well, of course, but it sounds like that's not going to be possible as long as Zelensky is there. The war won't end as long as
I don't believe that he will finish this war. I don't believe.
No, it sounds like it. If there are 7 attempts to finish the war and his only position has been the war needs to continue, he's clearly not the guy to end the war. So how do you get Zelensky out?
That's a good question, and I'm not the one to answer
Well, there are no elections, so...
But we are in a legal trap here. And the last time when he was planning elections, he actually didn't want to leave the martial law and wanted to have one-round elections so that he can manufacture them. And this is the article on a very reliable Ukrainian media outlet. The journalists talked to insiders from the office and from the parliament. Just another example. Look, there was this Munich security conference, and Zelensky assaulted the Prime Minister of Hungary, Mr. Orban. That's so interesting. It's like, I'm saying so many bad things. I feel so bad about that. But just like if you're a rational person, think about this.
Yes.
The leader of Ukraine standing in front of all the leaders and keeps assaulting one of the European leaders. In a week, this European leader will need to vote for a 90 billion loan for Ukraine. And obviously, Orban just blocked everything. And everybody is like pointing fingers to Orban, how bad Orban is, how bad Orban is. Perhaps he is. I'm not justifying Orban here. But if you are a leader of a country, how on earth are you assaulting a person from whom you will need a support of 90 billion of a loan, without which Ukraine just cannot go further?
Well, so that's a great question. And I watch him do the same thing to Donald Trump.
Absolutely. But can I finish?
So what is that?
Yeah, can I finish this
Please.
moment? The thing is that the conflict that has escalated recently is about a pipeline, oil pipeline. Hungary was getting Russian oil through Ukraine, and it's damaged. And Zelensky made this, again, huge performance, as if he is a brave hero who is fighting against Russian oil, Russian gas, all Russian, etc., etc. At the same time, Ukraine, on technical level, is repairing the pipeline. The European Commission is insisting that we do it as fast as possible. And Ukraine is sending the explanation to the European Commission. It will take some time, but we are offering you another pipeline so that there is no energy crisis. So the work is there, right? And Zelensky is just performing some stuff in his head. And the other important moment in this, do you know that this was France, not Hungary, who bought the biggest number of Russian energy products last year, including Russian LNG that it's selling to Germany? So why doesn't Zelensky go against Macron? I don't understand that.
Well, it's a great question. I'm aware of this.
And Donald Trump, I was watching that thing, that Oval Office situation. For me, it was so painful. It is so painful. Every time when I'm posting on my Twitter videos of ruined Ukrainian cities, every time I have this quote from Zelensky, we've got beautiful cities, come and see. I'm like, how you can say that these ruins are beautiful cities? The thing is that many people who know Zelensky, they characterize the situation that this is what's happening behind the camera usually. Such hysterical behavior, no control of emotions, this manipulation, attempts to prove himself. This is Zelensky. This is how he looks all the time.
So Ukrainians can't speak up for fear of being imprisoned or killed. But why do you think Western media hasn't spoken up?
Here, I would like to say the thing that the freedom of speech in Ukraine is in bad shape. But I believe that it improved when Donald Trump came to power for the second term, because there are more and more news coming up. And despite that, some journalists are also sent to the front lines or attacked, still, there are materials that are coming up. And when this freezing winter was happening, terrible winter, when people were freezing in their homes without light, without water, the whole revolution on Instagram, Ukrainian Instagram, started. And I wanted to tell you two trends, just two of multiple trends that are happening on Instagram right now, that will show you that Ukrainians are suffering under Zelensky. They don't support what Zelensky is doing. One of the trends is they are burning the books with Zelensky's speeches in their fireplaces or fires, saying, finally we figured out why we needed those. The second thing is very politically incorrect, and I'm very sorry in
You're
front
in a
of the
safe
audience.
place, don't worry.
Okay, I'm very sorry, but I try to describe the desperation and the dark humor that Ukrainians use. A driver is parking on the parking lot for a place for a disabled person. And another person is coming with a telephone asking, why did you park on the place for a disabled person? And the driver responds, I'm going to vote for Zelensky for the second time.
You mean mentally disabled? Yes.
So these are trends. This is not like one reel or two reels. These are trends, and they're going viral. And this is the way how people are trying to shout out, we are desperate. Please stop this war. Please stop this nonsense. Please stop this autocracy. There is no reason why to fight this war. It's senseless. You see, people lost all sense of this war. Like, if this war is for NATO or against NATO expansion, then Ukraine has no chances to be in NATO. If Putin conducts this war against Zelensky, then Zelensky is the main beneficiary of this war.
It's true.
If this war is for returning territories, then we have been losing territories for 3 years. If this war is for democracy, then we have no democracy in the country now. People in the frontline regions, they tell terrible things. One person told me, I don't know what we are fighting for. What's the difference between Ukraine and Russia right now? There is autocracy there and autocracy here. There is no anything that would be democratic now. So what's the fight for? This is not what I'm saying. This is what people from different regions are saying.
Yes.
And I believe that Zelensky had 2 chances of finishing this war in 2022. 2 chances. Now he says that 90% of Ukrainians will not forgive him giving up Donbass. Where does he come from with these numbers? Like, there are no such numbers. Realistically, no such numbers. And I was talking to people who represented Ukraine at negotiations in Istanbul in 2022.
Yes, the famous negotiations where they came pretty close.
Oh, they were almost done, yeah. And I was explained in details that they agreed for everything. And furthermore, which is very important, they said that Zelensky personally agreed to give away Donbass. And I was shocked. At that moment, it was a shocking news. And I said, really? Did he? And the guys told, of course he is. He is okay with that because he will stop the horror of war. He agreed for giving away the territory because that would mean the war is over. And now he is standing in front of millions of audiences telling, I cannot give away Donbass. You see, he is inconsistent. He is changing the positions all the time. The second time when he could and the office of the president planned he would finish the war was the end of 2022. And as I read the New York Times, who actually confirmed my insights that the Biden administration decided to go with his plan to continue that war. That was Mr. Blinken, who was advising, if Ukraine wants to fight, then Ukraine needs to fight, despite all the evidence that we could not win that war.
Of course not.
There is this thing also, everything that is said against Zelensky is being pro-Russian. And now, this Mr. Johnson, Prime Minister Johnson thing.
Boris Johnson
yes,
from the
Boris
UK.
Johnson is a big friend of Zelensky.
He's an evil man.
So, remember Bucha. Bucha is a small town in Kiev region, and it was occupied by Russia. And there are a lot of terrible things and terrible deaths happened there. And Zelensky came to Bucha after it was deoccupied on April 4th, 2022. And I remember him standing in front of the journalists, and he had this, terrible face and terrible, look, and it felt like he went through pain while seeing all those bodies there. But he was asked if he was going to continue the negotiations with Russia, and he said, yes, I am going to continue. That's fixed on a camera. He was going to continue. And then, they had all the agreement by positions about Donbass, about language, about many, many things. They agreed upon everything. And then Boris Johnson came. And now it is said that this is Putin's lies. But this story was told by Ukrainians. It was not told by Russians. Ukrainians who were trying to bring peace knew that Boris Johnson influenced the decision. And Zelensky was promised to have everything, weapons, influence, fame, and he will fight Russia and he will be a great hero. And that's everything that Zelensky wants. He doesn't care about people. He cares about staying in power. He cares about being the great hero in the history. So I believe there were two moments where he could finish this war, but he chose the war of attrition. I don't know how 25 million of Ukrainians who stay in the country can have war with attrition with Russia that has the population of 140 million people. With Russia, who, by the way, in 4 years, has not even borrowed for this war. And Ukraine has the debt of 100% of GDP. With Russia that evades sanctions, still tries to sell, and Ukraine has no market economy. I mean,
Russia is so much bigger than Ukraine that Ukraine could never win. It's just too big. Russia's too big.
The New York Times wrote a story that was scandalous in 2023, and the title was "Ukraine will need to choose between people and territories."
Yes.
And we are indeed choosing, and our leader is choosing territories.
But it's not, look, I'm not an expert at all on Eastern Europe, but I have Wikipedia. I just look up landmass, population, industrial capacity. You don't need that much information to know this country cannot beat that country in a land war. It was obvious. I don't understand.
I think it's obvious for Zelensky too, but he thrives on this war. He thrives on this war. Why would he finish it?
Well, because it's destroying his country.
I don't think he thinks about that. In 2024, I was talking to a very smart guy who knows Russia and knows Ukraine very well. He used to be an advisor to the president. He's an American, by the way. And he said me that Zelensky would finish the war till the end of 2024. And I said, no, he won't. He said, why? He's losing territories. Russians will go to Dnipropetrovsk and other regions,
Yep.
Zaporizhia, Odessa, Kharkiv, Sumy, Chernigiv. He names all those regions of Ukraine. And I'm like, this is not the reason for him to stop. And the guy could not understand. Like, he could not. He's like, but why? You're going to lose the territories. You're going to lose more. And I'm saying, this is not how he thinks. He imagines the lives like his thinking is limited with thinking of what he sees of his beautiful golden office, you know. And the guy was like, okay, they're in Zaporizhia. I'm like, not a reason. They're in Dnipro, not a reason. They're there. And then the guy says, okay, there needs to be somewhere a point where he will understand that Russians are winning. Maybe when Russians are with the guns in his office. I'm like, yeah, that's where he will understand they are.
So it sounds like he doesn't care very much about Ukraine.
He never cared. He never cared about the people. That's the point. I tried to come up not only with the insights. I think the things that I told you are quite terrible, but this is who he is. But let's just check the facts online, okay? At the Munich conference, Zelensky insisted that ceasefire is the condition for peace, for negotiations, and for elections. He is pushing for ceasefire, again, knowing that Russia is against ceasefire. It's like the NATO story, right?
Yes.
If you go online and check his speech for the UN General Assembly September 2024, he was saying that no ceasefire is possible, that it's very irresponsible to ask Ukraine for a ceasefire, that a ceasefire will lead to a frozen conflict, and he was going against a ceasefire all the time. Then, second thing, in June 2024, there was a peace summit where Ukraine presented Zelensky's peace formula. There were 160 delegations coming from different countries. And I truly believe that those delegations wanted to discuss peace. There were discussions about energy security, returning children, and something else. And Switzerland suggested that they invite Russian delegation, maybe even Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
And Office of the President was very much against it. And Office of the President of Ukraine even organized a media campaign saying that it is absolutely morally impossible to talk to Russia, to Putin. We need just to pressure, no negotiations with Russia. You see? At the same time, when he was presenting the formula of peace, Ukraine was organizing the Kursk region operation. And how do actually you offer the world to have peace and at the same time are planning operation to invade Kursk region? You see, these are very inconsistent things. Then after his just formula, where he suggested one thing, he offered victory plan, where he suggested completely different things. Then in November 2024, he said that he would agree for temporary occupation of some territories if another government-controlled territory of Ukraine will be included in NATO. Then, in several days, he said that he was misinterpreted. I'm telling you so many examples when he has been changing the conditions, preconditions to end this war.
Because he doesn't want to end the war.
Because he doesn't want to end this war. I counted with my insights around 7 attempts to finish this war, where he used different mediators, he used different countries. We promised those mediators, he promised those countries, those leaders, that he would start negotiations, that he would agree for conditions, and he always lied.
When did you leave the country? Ukraine?
I would prefer not to talk about that.
Okay.
I stayed in the country in 2022. We were shelled, by the way. When Russians were living in Butch, we were shelled. It's just pure luck that he didn't hit the house we were. My husband went to the front lines. We stayed in 2023, majority of 2024, beginning of 2025. And I had so multiple sources that were saying that Zelensky is not going to finish this war. People are going crazy there. I was going crazy. you're like in the closed cage. You're being shelled and bombed. You can die any moment from Russian drone or Russian missile. At the same time, you can't do anything. There are no economic opportunities. There is no freedom of speech. Anything you do can be, treated in a different way. The country is full of bans. Everything is banned. There are strange rules. Like, there is this very strange rule that all the cars need to stop at 9 a.m. on the roads to listen to the hymn. It's just, like if you drive and then there is 9 a.m. and there is Ukrainian hymn, you need to stop it. There is really strange agenda and it looks like surreal. The country, I don't recognize Ukraine anymore.
Everything is banned? What does that mean?
Like, he uses bans, like there is this culture that he developed. The culture of banning, canceling people, artists,
Churches.
Poets, churches, writers, like anything he can connect to Russia somehow. Sometimes it doesn't have any connection to Russia. It always makes us weaker. Sometimes these are Ukrainians from the past, but they used to live under like Russian Empire or the USSR. There is this whole culture of cancellation. He cancels bloggers, journalists, not personally, but he has this tendency, he has these orders. Like, for instance, in late 2023, I learned from the security service that Zelensky collected his guys and told them that they needed to go against critical bloggers. At the beginning of 2024, there were like purges of bloggers. Bloggers were called to the security service, having conversations, why they did that, why they said that they will be accused of being pro-Russian. There was a bunch of bloggers that went against the war, and they said, we don't need the borders of 1991. We want to stop this war. And all of them were called for a security service. One guy needed to leave the country. He was threatened. Every story can become a bigger story, can become a story with security service. You see, it can become a story of a treason. By the way, the cases of treason rised multiple times in 4 years, multiple times. Treason is just another punishment, you see?
He sounds like a Bolshevik.
In many ways, it feels like it's the USSR that we read about. In many ways, it is.
So, just to restate the question, is there any way to get rid of Zelensky?
That's a good thing. The problem, how to do this in a legal way, and who is going to be next? Who's going to fight with Zelensky on the electoral field, and how to restore the electoral field in general. You see?
Yes.
And there are so many questions there that are not being solved at all. And I'm not sure he wants to solve them. So one big question to all the Ukrainians and Westerners who have resources, who have the power, who are strong enough, is actually how to make it in the legal field, how to finish this.
Yes.
And that's the answer to your question, why are Ukrainians silent? Rich people are afraid of being sanctioned. By the way, it's also a legal instrument that Zelensky uses. He sanctions his own citizens, and it's absolutely anti-constitutional. And people are afraid.
How can you sanction your own citizens?
Yes, he sanctions his own citizens. That's pretty public and on his website. For I don't know, he comes up with the reasons. Working for Russia or whatever.
And what happens when you're sanctioned?
Your businesses can be closed, your accounts frozen. The former president is sanctioned, so he says he cannot use his money anymore.
So just to go back to something you said earlier that I should have followed up on. When you were working for Zelensky, he told Putin, I think you said it was 2019, that Ukraine would not join NATO. Then you fast forward a couple of years, 3 years, and he's telling the world that Ukraine does plan to join NATO, which you said is impossible. But what do you think changed his mind? What changed?
Well, I definitely know that he wanted to influence the American administration. He really did want. And
Influence the American administration in what way?
yeah, I mean, he wanted to get something. He wanted to get some support, friendship, to get something. I remember the interview. I remember whom that interview was given when he first said, why are we not in NATO? So it was a TV interview, and I was preparing messages. It has never been in messages. We never discussed that, actually. It was not at the table at all. And he was sitting there, and the journalist asked him, so what would you tell or ask Biden about? And he said, why are not we in NATO? And I started looking at the messages, and there is no this NATO thing. He just came up with that. And Zelensky is the kind of person, if you applaud, he's going to continue. And there were a lot of nationalists who applauded, who thought, oh, that's great stuff, guy, do it. And so he saw the applause, he saw the reaction, and since his ratings were dropping down, and there was positive feedback, he just started pushing through this agenda. Again, I read the book about Biden, and there was the description of the meeting in 2021. That was after I left, a few months. And it happened that Zelensky insisted on this NATO issue from Biden, thinking that that was only Biden who was the obstacle to this. And if Biden said, then they will be in NATO. He didn't want to listen to any arguments, any facts, nothing. And then when Biden said, look, there is no consensus for this, the guy said, but NATO is outdated organization, and it's going to fall apart. Germany and France are going to leave NATO now. And as the journalist explains, even those who really liked Zelensky, they were blown up by this. They thought he went too far. But this is who is Zelensky. He's always escalating. He's always demanding. He's always proving himself. I was talking to one guy who used to work under 2 or 3 presidents, and he said me that he's telling everyone that these 2 guys, Zelensky and Yermak, they are just 6-year-olds. He meant because they were 6 years in power. Now they are 7-year-olds. And I myself was thinking that they behave more as teenagers, but we never had argument that they behave as adults. You see? So I believe that Zelensky, if that journalist who wasn't inside at the White House says that Zelensky thought Biden was weak, I believe Zelensky thought Biden is weak and he can pressure and get the NATO thing. Because Zelensky actually doesn't have much understanding of how things are working in his own government and globally. Bucha. Bucha is a small town in Kiev region, and it was occupied by Russia. And there are a lot of terrible things and terrible deaths happened there. And Zelensky came to Bucha after it was deoccupied on April 4th, 2022. And I remember him standing in front of the journalists, and he had this, terrible face and terrible, look, and it felt like he went through pain while seeing all those bodies there. But he was asked if he was going to continue the negotiations with Russia, and he said, yes, I am going to continue. That's fixed on a camera. He was going to continue. And then, they had all the agreement by positions about Donbass, about language, about many, many things. They agreed upon everything. And then Boris Johnson came. And now it is said that this is Putin's lies. But this story was told by Ukrainians. It was not told by Russians. Ukrainians who were trying to bring peace knew that Boris Johnson influenced the decision. And Zelensky was promised to have everything, weapons, influence, fame, and he will fight Russia and he will be a great hero. And that's everything that Zelensky wants. He doesn't care about people. He cares about staying in power. He cares about being the great hero in the history. So I believe there were two moments where he could finish this war, but he chose the war of attrition. I don't know how 25 million of Ukrainians who stay in the country can have war with attrition with Russia that has the population of 140 million people. With Russia, who, by the way, in 4 years, has not even borrowed for this war. And Ukraine has the debt of 100% of GDP. With Russia that evades sanctions, still tries to sell, and Ukraine has no market economy. I mean,
Russia is so much bigger than Ukraine that Ukraine could never win. It's just too big. Russia's too big.
The New York Times wrote a story that was scandalous in 2023, and the title was "Ukraine will need to choose between people and territories."
Yes.
And we are indeed choosing, and our leader is choosing territories.
But it's not, I mean, look, I'm not an expert at all on Eastern Europe, but I have Wikipedia. I just look up landmass, population, industrial capacity. You don't need that much information to know this country cannot beat that country in a land war. It was obvious. I don't understand.
I think it's obvious for Zelensky too, but he thrives on this war. He thrives on this war. Why would he finish it?
Well, because it's destroying his country.